In America, the tradition of Sunday as a holy day has characterized religious life for centuries. On one hand, its proper observance has been seen as a requirement for God's blessings. On the other hand, some people felt that to ignore the holy day was to invite disaster.
A decade or so before the Civil War began, a northern physician who was an abolitionist and who decided to take a tour of the South to see the conditions for himself and was inclined to see them with quite a jaundiced eye, found himself in New Orleans one Sunday. And he was shocked with the Sabbath desecration that he observed, the gambling, the prostituting, the general revelry of the day. And the next day, a terrible, destructive fire broke out, as was quite common in the 19th century, and the city was laid to waste. And he wrote in his diary that he thought it was a just deserts for it breaking the Sabbath.
Times changed, and so did attitudes towards Sunday. As industry became more highly mechanized and labor laws limited the work week, folks began to taste the luxury of free time. Sunday itself became associated more and more with leisure, and that meant trouble.
The problem was that the dollar mark was being put on Sunday through leisure and recreation. That is to say that professional baseball, theaters, amusement parks, all of these activities that constituted leisure and recreation were profitable, and many entrepreneurs were making profit from it, and therefore they were profiting from the Sabbath.
In the eyes of many religious leaders, the secularization of Sunday was a giant step in the wrong direction. There were strong and influential voices calling for more laws to limit commercial and even private activity on Sunday. Those efforts to protect Sunday continue even today, supported, for example, by the Lord's Day Alliance.
And the Lord's Day Alliance takes this position because it believes that the idea of a Sabbath day or a day of rest really antedates any of our religious communities, even that of Judaism itself.
Back when the Lord's Day Alliance was formed, the issue of Sunday laws was really a hot topic. In May of 1888, Senator Henry Blair of New Hampshire proposed legislation to limit secular activities on Sundays within the jurisdiction of the United States federal government. Senator Blair made it clear that the aim of his bill was to preserve the first day of the week as a day of rest and religious observance. The bill was referred to the Senate Committee on Education and Labor, where Blair was chairman. Among those who raised objections to the proposed legislation was Alonzo T. Jones.
Sir, you may speak of the power of the majority in social and civil matters, but there is no majority, however large, that can invade the territory of a man's religion. Not in this land, not under our Constitution.
Well, Mr. Jones, you fail to recognize the right, or more importantly, the responsibility of the state to protect the welfare of the people as a whole.
Senator, it seems that you fail to recognize the clear distinction between man's responsibility to the state and his duty toward God. The first, he must render under the force of law. The second, duty to God must be carried out only under the force of love, and that freely, voluntarily. No law can command love.
But the law of the state must protect the people to carry out their duty to God. Our Sunday law is written to ensure the preservation of the Lord's Day for the benefit of the people.
An admirable goal, Senator Blair, but completely unnecessary. Our Constitution already recognizes the rights of the people with respect to their religion. Your Sunday law would add nothing to our fundamental freedoms. It would rather add restrictions.
I'm afraid, sir, that you are blind to the realities of our age. If men owe a duty to God and do not willingly perform it, they become a corrupting influence in society.
This proposed Sunday law would have a corrupting influence by introducing force and coercion into its observance.
On the contrary, the intended effect is to enhance the Sabbath. If men do not consent to honor the Lord's Day, if their actions on that day are unrestrained by civil law, excuse me, then they trample on the very rights of those who would honor and observe the day as holy unto the Lord.
With all due respect, Senator, can you not see that your Sunday bill proposes to trample on the rights of the religious minorities? Do you really want to revert to those dark ages where church and state united to force men to violate their conscience and conform to an officially established religion?
Now, that is an unworthy comparison, sir. Our Sunday laws for the ultimate benefit of the whole society. Is it not a legitimate function of the state to legislate on behalf of the common good?
The common good of which you value so highly is not served by restricting the rights of one man's conscience in order to enlarge the rights of another. It is best served by the freedoms upon which this republic was established. State-sponsored religious coercion defies the clear intent of the Founding Fathers.
But this law provides an exemption for those who wish to worship on another day. Jews, Seventh-day Baptists, you're Seventh-day Adventists, for example, who observe Saturday as the Sabbath. So where's the problem?
The problem is...
Why, just this morning, a Mrs. Batum of the Women's Christian Temperance Union addressed this committee in support of such an exemption. She has conferred with representatives of 9 different groups who observe Saturday rather than Sunday, and you know how many of those approved the exemption? All of them. Every single one.
Senator, I have great respect for the temperance principles promoted by Mrs. Batum's organization, but she does not speak for my denomination on the question of exemptions.
Come now, Professor Jones, are you about to object to exemptions that would certainly benefit your group and several others?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we do object. An exemption clause would not change the proposed law so as to modify our opposition. Here is the principle, Senator. If the law were just and perfect, an exemption would not be necessary. Another thing, an exemption clause is nothing other than a toleration clause in disguise. Toleration is not liberty. It is merely a form of condescension, the majority putting up with the opinions and convictions of the minority. Our Constitution guarantees not tolerance, but rights, and we claim those rights as American citizens.
Mr. Jones, without yielding the point, let me move to another question. How would you react if we were to rewrite this bill as a Saturday law, with Saturday as the Sabbath and not Sunday at all? I suppose you would take a very different position.
To the contrary, Senator. All laws that attempt to force the conscience are manifestly unchristian and unconstitutional by their very nature. Therefore, Senator, we are against every Sunday law that has ever been made since the first one enacted by Constantine to the one you are proposing now. And if you changed it from a Sunday law to a Saturday law, we would oppose it just as firmly.
Senator Blair's bill never made it out of committee. But there were already plenty of other Sunday laws, which are commonly called blue laws. In fact, in America today, 49 of the 50 states have laws protecting Sunday. Alaska is the only exception. But just because these laws exist doesn't necessarily mean the issue is settled.
State Sunday laws have been challenged under a number of provisions of the Constitution, both the federal and the state constitutions, including due process of law, equal protection, violation of the separation of church and state, and violation of the free exercise of religion. By and large, they've been upheld by the state courts as constitutional.
Back in 1961, the U.S. Supreme Court heard 4 different cases that challenged the constitutionality of Sunday laws. Religious liberty advocates were hoping for judicial recognition that Sunday laws are unconstitutional based on their religious content.
In a case called McGowan versus Maryland, one of those 4 cases, the court decided that although the laws were obviously originally religious, they talk about the Lord's Day, they talk about the Sabbath, they talk about a whole pervasive lineup of religious terms and religious rationales. By 1961, the court had found that the rationale had evolved to be laws that protect workers' rights. And of course, when you ask the question, can states pass laws that protect workers' rights, the answer is, of course, yes.
With so many blue laws on the books in the United States, it's fair to ask why we hear so little news about their enforcement. Are local authorities arresting folks? Are judges handing out sentences? Are the public coffers being enriched by the fines levied on the guilty parties?
I think there are 3 primary reasons why we don't hear a lot about the enforcement of Sunday laws. First of all, the laws that are on the books are often not enforced because law enforcement simply has other priorities. Secondly, there isn't a great will and interest among the general populace in this issue currently. And I think thirdly, the laws that are enforced are often more or less invisible to the public. Washington, D.C. bans working on construction on Sunday mornings. Most people don't notice that because they're not in the construction trade, and even if it does occur to them, it's not a very significant impingement on their daily lives.
In our secular and materialistic age, there are not many voices calling out in favor of religiously based Sunday laws. Besides, the record seems to show that legislation is not a good partner to religion. Even the Lord's Day Alliance, a solidly pro-Sunday organization, agrees with that.
The history of the Lord's Day Alliance has been one in the past of maintaining or trying to maintain blue laws in the United States. We've come to the place today where we feel that is a retrogressive kind of approach. Legislation may help, but our end really is to promote a cultural understanding of the psychological and sociological importance of this day, which for us clearly has Christian theological and wider religious underpinnings.
History proves that in matters of religion, persuasion is better than force. But even today, it's not at all unusual for people who keep the seventh-day Sabbath to come up against laws that restrict the free exercise of their religion.
In 1982, I was employed as a full-time worker by the state of California Department of Food and Agriculture.
Quasi, I had applied for a position as a plant quarantine inspector with the California Department of Agriculture. He received the appointment and went to the post to look it over prior to actually reporting for duty.
When I got there, I found out that I had been scheduled to work on Saturday, and I brought this up to the attention of the supervisor.
The individual who was in charge at that particular location said to him, "If you're not willing to work on Saturdays, I'm not going to process your papers and you will not be employed by the Department of Agriculture."
I contacted the Church State Council, and with their help, we appealed to the state of California, Department of Food and Agriculture, attempting to get this matter settled through administrative process. But the state of California would not listen, and subsequently they terminated the appointment.
And after a substantial period of time, we did get a trial, which lasted several days, and ultimately, unfortunately, the judge ruled against him, which is not unusual for Sabbatarians. So we immediately filed an appeal before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The matter was ultimately brought before 3 judges in the Ninth Circuit, and they ruled in his favor, reversing the trial court judge. The state of California was shocked and filed a petition for review by the United States Supreme Court, which turned down the appeal, and thus the Ninth Circuit decision is good law and held in favor of Quasi and in favor of the need to accommodate religious beliefs.
From the beginning of this process to the end, took about 17 years, but we pressed on because we believed that we were doing God's will. And secondly, we believed that others could benefit from our ordeal.
Losing your job because of your Sabbath beliefs seems like a minor matter compared to what's happened in some places. For example, back in 1973, the leaders of one large African nation ordered all citizens to spend 1 day a week repairing roads and bridges and maintaining their communities. Sounded like a great idea, on the surface at least. But the national day for community work was Saturday, and that meant trouble for thousands of Seventh-day Adventists.
Enter.
Sir, this is Gideon Kadinda.
Yes, Kadenda. Thank you for coming, Citizen Kadenda. Where'd you find him? What was he doing?
He was right there at his church with the others. 50, maybe 60 people. He was in front saying a prayer. There was only 2 of us, so we couldn't bring them all. We tried to talk some sense into him, to make him tell them to leave the church.
The others? They're still there in the church?
Yes, at first, they tried to follow us. We told them to leave, get to work, and they went back to the church.
Okay. Citizen Kadenda, tell me, what did you see out there as my men brought you here?
People working.
Yes. They're filling the holes in the roads. They're cutting the bushes and the weeds. They're doing these things here, and all over this country, others are doing the same. And do you know why? Why are people all over this nation working in their communities today?
National Service Day.
So, you do know it's National Service Day. Today and every Saturday of the year is National Service Day. But for some reason, you do not join your fellow citizens in working for the good of your community and your country. Instead, you are at church.
But I am happy to serve my country on another day of the week. Just pick the day and I will do it.
Chair. Sit down, please. The law of the land says Saturday is National Service Day. So that is the day that we all will do our work in our community. That includes you and all the people in your church. You are their leader, so you must tell them.
Even if I tell them, they won't do it. Not on a Saturday. Saturday is God's Sabbath.
You can tell them now that has changed. Let them worship God some other day.
I cannot change the day. Saturday is God's Sabbath, not mine. It is His commandment that we keep it. I cannot change it.
Listen well, Katende. Make your people act like good citizens, or you will personally suffer the consequences. This bruise on your face will seem like a mosquito bite. Take and lock him up.
Sir, look at me. These men, they have beaten me. My blood is on my shirt and on your hands. They may beat me again, perhaps kill me. But this will not change anything. I cannot tell my church members to break the laws of God.
We'll see, Gideon Kadende. We'll see about that.
Seems that Sabbath keeping can be expensive, inconvenient, and even dangerous. In the face of all this, you'd be surprised at how many Christians there are who observe the seventh-day Sabbath today. The Directory of Sabbath-Observing Groups, published by the Bible Sabbath Association, lists over 400 Sabbath-keeping churches and denominations. One of them, the Colorado-based Church of God, Seventh Day, has a worldwide membership of close to 200,000.
The Seventh-day Sabbath is important to us as a denomination because of our commitment to be a biblical, a Bible-based fellowship. We believe that the Sabbath is an integral part of biblical teaching, and it would be impossible for us to teach the whole counsel of God and to live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God if we continued to ignore His seventh-day Sabbath.
It was back in 1896 that the Church of God and Saints of Christ was established by William Saunders Crowdy in Lawrence, Kansas. Although he was a Baptist deacon at the time, Prophet Crowdy received a divinely inspired view of the keys to salvation, one of which was the Ten Commandments. This naturally led to his observance of the seventh-day Sabbath. While it appeared that he was introducing something new, Prophet Crowdy actually reestablished a form of prophetic Judaism that has shaped the lives of men and women since antiquity.
Many of the smaller Sabbath-keeping groups grew out of the Worldwide Church of God, founded by businessman Herbert W. Armstrong. The story has an unlikely beginning. You see, it was actually Armstrong's wife who got him interested in the seventh-day Sabbath. It happened back in 1926.
In Eugene, Oregon, Mr. Armstrong's wife was convinced by a neighbor that she should be keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. The lady proved this to her from the Bible. When she told Herbert about this, he was irate. So irate that at one point in their argument, he said that he would divorce her if she continued on this fanaticism, as he called it. She said, rather than divorce me, why don't you look into it and see whether or not I am correct?
Herbert Armstrong didn't divorce his wife. Instead, he accepted her challenge and spent several months studying in a nearby library. To his amazement, he could not prove her wrong. He had backed himself into a proverbial corner and could reach only one conclusion. Saturday, the seventh day of the week, is the Bible Sabbath. This became a hallmark of the church he founded. Herbert W. Armstrong died in 1986. The new leadership of the Worldwide Church of God took the denomination in a different direction, bringing it into line with the majority of the Christian world. This included shifting their day of worship to Sunday. The changes cost the church about half its membership. We see a very different picture when we look at the Seventh-day Adventists, the preeminent proponents of the seventh-day Sabbath today. Membership totals more than 13 million in some 200 countries and is growing rapidly. Although their theology is firmly rooted in the Protestant tradition, Seventh-day Adventists have been a special target of criticism because of their uncompromising commitment to the Bible Sabbath, a commitment that some opponents see as a denial of the Christian's freedom in Christ. Freedom, of course, is at the heart of the Christian faith. There are some who charge that keeping the seventh-day Sabbath is a rejection of Christian freedom. They say that Sabbath keeping is legalism, an attempt to earn salvation by obedience. But is true Sabbath keeping really legalism?
God instituted the Sabbath at creation before sin. Was it legalism then? If it wasn't legalism then, what inherently makes it legalistic now? When God gave them the manna for 40 years in the wilderness, the manna didn't fall on the Sabbath. Was that legalism? When God gave them the 10 Commandments, were all 10 of the commandments legalistic? Was God binding them to a legalistic code? No, he wasn't. Obedience is not legalism. Obedience can be an expression of our response in love and gratitude to God for his grace and salvation.
Now, most Christian theologians agree that salvation is based on God's promises, his covenant, rather than on a person's behavior. Therefore, they insist that keeping Sabbath in obedience to the commandment is not necessary. Seventh-day Adventists agree that salvation comes only on the basis of God's promises, but they see the Sabbath as an important part of man's relationship with God.
Throughout Scripture, the covenant is presented as an experience of resting in God. God wants people to rely upon him, and he gives them the provisions that he's given them in the covenant so they can have this rest and security in God. When we're outside of that covenant relationship with God, we're concerned about our salvation, we're concerned about the future, what that might bring, but within that covenantal experience, you have complete rest and confidence in God. The Sabbath symbolized that rest.
In keeping Sabbath, we rest in this assurance that Jesus on the cross has redeemed us, and we are saved, and we are his children, and we can rely on him.
Well, if the Sabbath does have a proper place in the Christian's life, why does it have to be on Saturdays? Most churches teach that Christians should keep Sunday instead, and they cite New Testament references to support their view. But does the New Testament really teach that Sunday, the first day of the week, is the Christian Sabbath?
The first day is mentioned in the New Testament. Christians even seem to have met a time or two on the first day. But there's no transfer of the importance of the seventh-day Sabbath to the first day, what we now call Sunday. It does not become the day of rest. It does not become the day when God's creative activity is celebrated. It simply does not become the day of Christian worship, which remains the seventh-day Sabbath.
But here is another consideration that is often overlooked: the place of the Sabbath in Bible prophecy, particularly the prophetic book of Revelation, also known as the Apocalypse. The prophetic drama unfolds, symbolically portraying the war between Jesus Christ and Satan, his great enemy. It's the conflict of the ages, sweeping across the stage of human events. It culminates in a thrilling climax heralded by the appearance of angelic messengers.
And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters.
In the context of the closing scenes and phases of this drama, with the hour of the judgment having come, earth dwellers are to worship God. And then God is described. Using the language of the fourth commandment, God is described as the one who created all things. And because the passage echoes the fourth commandment, I don't believe it's stretching it too far for us to understand that at this final point in the drama, dwellers on earth are issued a heavenly summons to come back to worshiping God as the Creator on his Sabbath day, on the seventh-day Sabbath.
So the Sabbath is part of God's divine plan to heal the broken relationship with his human children. Even in a world where life's true purpose and meaning have been almost forgotten, where faith languishes in the rubble of infidelity, even in such a world as this, the Sabbath continues to signal God's call to the human soul. The lost pages of history have revealed the amazing story of this almost forgotten day, the seventh-day Sabbath, the biblical day of holy rest and sacred worship. We've traced it from its origin in the biblical account of creation, where God established it to memorialize his creative work and define the weekly cycle. We've tracked it through the time of Jesus, whose ministry infused it with new meaning. And we've seen how it lived on despite the attempts to regulate it, bury it, or ban it. We've uncovered ancient evidence of the Sabbath in places as diverse as Ireland and Ethiopia, where it survived through ages of opposition and attack. We've seen it revived in the teachings of the early Anabaptists and the English Seventh-day men. We've seen it preserved in the face of persecution and martyrdom. We've seen it restored to worldwide attention as thousands upon thousands of Christians discover for themselves the place of the seventh-day Sabbath in a Bible-based religious experience. And the Bible completes its picture of the Sabbath by giving us a preview of the life to come, the future life, in a perfect universe. Listen to this. As the new heavens and the new earth that I make will endure before me, from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all mankind will come and bow down before me, says the Lord. So the Sabbath, the memorial of God's creative and redemptive work, from the earth as it came from the Creator's hand to the perfectly restored new earth, the Sabbath stands as a sanctuary in time, transcending history and projecting its promise of rest into the eternal future.
Somebody magnify the Lord. Let us exalt his name together. We're going to the hill of the Lord. The hill of the Lord, yeah. Yeah, hallelujah. We lack words to describe you. We fall short of breath to give you